Before we begin with the new installment of Star Wars Explained, I just want to say that What If Order 66 Never Happened Part 2 is currently being written, so stay tuned. What if Luke chose to join Vader in the Cloak of the Dark Side after his duel with him on Bespin? What would happen if Vader chose to take his son as an apprentice and train him in the ways of the dark side to ultimately destroy the Emperor, and what could the Star Wars universe look like as a result of this drastic change? To set up this scenario, let's say it takes place while Luke is on the ground being pushed there by the might of Darth Vader during the Bespin duel. Let's say when Vader states he is beaten, Luke actually gives up and releases his grasp on his saber, and it tumbles down the chasm into the depths of Cloud City. Luke would have met his match at the hands of Vader, and he would know it, slowly turning and kneeling in front of the Dark Lord. Vader would then put his hand out to Luke and tell him he made the wise choice, and they would rule the galaxy as father and son and destroy the Emperor together. Meanwhile, on the Millennium Falcon, Leia would sense the great shift in the Force and fall to her knees, overwhelmed with anxiety for their current situation and grief over Luke's decision. Although Leia would be heartbroken, a soft, comforting voice would enter her mind, telling her to travel to Dagobah and search for Jedi Master Yoda. At this time, Luke would be informing Vader of Yoda's location and the training he had undergone at his hands. Vader would be pleased and explain to Luke he would need to remain hidden as to not have the Emperor learn of his survival to ensure Vader could train Luke on his own in the dark side in secrecy. Vader would then choose to contact the Emperor and lie about the fate of Luke, telling him he refused to turn and was struck down by Vader. Vader would also tell the Emperor that in Luke's final moments he revealed the location of the last Jedi as he struggled for life. The Emperor would be overwhelmingly pleased and order Vader after the last of the Jedi. On the Millennium Falcon, Leia would be speeding to Dagobah to find Yoda, and when she finally arrived on the planet, she would be met at the base of the ramp of the Falcon by a small, feeble-looking alien, explaining he was the Jedi Master and that they needed to depart quickly. Yoda would then enter the ship and inform Leia that they had much to discuss. Eventually, Luke and Vader would descend on the planet of Dagobah in search for Yoda, and Vader would sense the strange presence of the planet, being drawn to the cave where Luke experienced his own vision during his training under Yoda. Vader would pause for a brief moment before entering the cave in search of Yoda and knowledge, but would step in and embrace the darkness. Vader would suddenly see himself be engulfed in flames as the vines and stones around him transformed into the very lava that scarred him long ago, but Vader would stand firm. Vader would not be overwhelmed by the strength of the maleficent energy in the cave. He would bask in its glory. This would be the moment where Vader would experience the potential of the dark side as the lava around him faded into the glory of him sitting on a throne with his son by his side. The Dark Lord would then exit the cave and proclaim to Luke that it would be time to begin his training and that he had found the perfect location in which for him to learn. Again on the Falcon, Yoda would have skimmed over the details of the situation as to get to the point that Leia may in fact be the last hope for the galaxy and that she must learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi. Leia would accept the great challenge before her, and as Luke was training still on Dagobah, she would begin with her new master as well. Some time would pass, and Vader would eventually deem Luke ready to fight the Emperor, as he had trained for a long while in the presence of such pure fear and darkness. Even while Vader was gone enforcing the will of the Emperor, the young Luke had trained, and now the very essence of the dark side of the Force would exude off of his very presence. Now the once promising Jedi pupil would be unrecognizable, angry, and full of rage for the Emperor and his former friends, beginning to tap into and feel the real strength of the power he wielded. Luke would be ready, and together, father and son would depart for the Emperor. The pair would travel across the galaxy with Vader having previously set up a meeting between the two on the second Death Star. The Emperor would be in his throne room on the second Death Star, looking off into space, pondering the state of the galaxy he ruled when the blast doors behind him would open and in would step Darth Vader. The Emperor would smile and turn around, telling Vader how impressed he was with his accomplishments with destroying the unwilling boy, imbuing the Emperor with newfound faith in his apprentice. But suddenly, the Emperor's joy would fade, as something would be off. Instead of kneeling at the feet of the Emperor, Vader would be standing tall, and even through the mask of Vader, the Emperor could feel his piercing eyes moving over him. "Lord Vader," the Emperor asked, "is there an issue that needs to be brought to my attention?" Suddenly and violently, the blast doors behind the two would tear off the walls, and in would step Luke, cloaked in darkness. Without even looking at Luke, Vader would activate his lightsaber and slowly approach the Emperor with his weapon at the ready. Luke would join him at his side, now activating his very own red lightsaber. The Emperor's face would then be granted with a yellow-teethed grin, ear to ear, as he would make the short but powerful statement, "As is the way of the Sith." The Emperor would then lunge forward, and a swirl of lightning would engulf his body, firing from his fingertips. Vader would be blasted backwards into a wall, but Luke would put up a force wall strong enough to diminish the blunt of the lightning. Vader would quickly regain his feet and approach the Emperor yet again, striking downward at the Sith Lord. But Palpatine would catch Vader's blow with his hand and move it away with a chuckle. Quickly, however, Luke would launch a powerful force push, throwing the Emperor backwards into a wall. Vader would leap towards the now downed Emperor with his saber raised yet again above his head, as the Emperor would barely have time to evade. Just as fast, however, Vader would swing backwards, but would be met with a now activated lightsaber of the Emperor. Just as he fronted off this attack, however, Luke would lunge towards him, and the Emperor would be forced to break his blade lock with Vader and just narrowly evade the devastating power of Luke's weapon. The fight would continue similarly for a lengthy amount of time, with Palpatine standing strong against father and son united. The very walls of the chamber would begin to crumble, as pillars would be split in half by the might of lightsaber swings. The three warriors, now exhausted, would launch their final attacks, with Palpatine evading Luke's strikes yet again, but blasting Vader in his helmet with a huge torrent of lightning. Vader would fall back staggered, but suddenly the lightning would stop, and the Emperor would stare at his former apprentice in absolute shock. Extending out of Palpatine's heart would be a lightsaber, with a frustrated Luke responsible for the killing strike. Ripping the saber out of Palpatine's chest, the Emperor would smile and fall to the ground with a huge flash of blue energy. At this point, Vader would be greatly injured. As father and son reveled in their victory, suddenly a light tapping would begin to echo throughout the chamber. The two Dark Warriors would be puzzled momentarily until out of the shadows would emerge Master Yoda. Luke would turn to face him, and Vader would struggle to remain on his feet due to his severe injuries, but ultimately turn to face him as well. "So you have come to die a warrior's death, Master Yoda," Luke would say. "No, my old apprentice, come to bring back the Jedi I have." And again, out of the shadows would step a figure completely covered in a white robe. Both Luke and Vader would be stunned, as Yoda would look to the floor and proclaim, "There was another." The figure would drop the robe to reveal a Jedi Knight, Leia, who would pull a lightsaber and ignite it, revealing a blue blade. Leia would then proclaim proudly that she was a Jedi like her father before her. Luke would become enraged and strike out, but he would be met with Leia's blade matching his strength. Vader would activate his saber and attempt to strike Leia down, but would be flung backwards by a force push by Yoda. "Old I am," Yoda would say, "but my work is not yet done." And now, even more injured and hyperventilating Vader would stand and reach out with the Force to Yoda, using all he had left to crush the Jedi Master. Yoda would attempt to block the power of the darkness within Vader, but his frail body could not hold up, and he would be thrown into one of the few remaining pillars. Vader would then topple to the floor, exhausted. Meanwhile, across the room, Luke and Leia would be exchanging blows, analyzing the fighting style of one another. Luke would be the superior duelist, as he had had more experience, but he would also be exhausted from his previous fight with the Emperor, allowing Leia to keep pace. Leia would be quick, and her blows would be strong, but each time, by some miracle, her strikes would be met with the lightsaber of Luke. Leia would parry, then spin, and swing hard. Luke's blade would meet hers yet again, however, but this time, he would be met with a heavy punch in his lower jaw. Tasting blood in his mouth, Luke would begin to laugh, saying he was impressed with the strength of his sister. Suddenly, the entire room would begin to shake as rebel starfighters emerged from space and could be seen flying around and fighting Imperial forces, revealing a huge, large-scale attack on the Death Star. Leia would now assume a stance and raise her saber in front of her face, telling her brother he had fought so hard but fallen so far, and that the rebels were going to destroy the base and him along with it. She would also tell him it was not too late and that he could come with her. Luke would look at the starfighters outside the blast windows, catching a glimpse of the Millennium Falcon. Luke's head would bow to the ground, and Leia would approach him. Luke would then slowly raise his head, revealing not the emotion of regret and sadness, but rage and betrayal. Luke would spin around fast as lightning, cutting Leia across the leg and holding her in the air with the Force. "You betrayed me! My friends betrayed me!" Luke would scream out in absolute hatred, and his once blue eyes would change into a sharp, piercing yellow. From the tips of Luke's fingers would then shoot torrents of lightning, shocking his sister, torturing her. The room would then quickly shake again, and for a moment, Luke would lose his grasp on Leia. Leia would take this moment to break free and retreat, scooping up Yoda in her arms and activating the elevator, escaping off the Death Star with a stolen ship. Luke would stand in the throne room of the Emperor in shock, looking at the body of Palpatine, then his father, injured and breathing heavily on the floor. Luke would approach his now injured father and tell him his time was over, that it was time for the new Sith to rise, and that the Sith of old like him were obsolete. Luke would then turn and walk away from his father, as Vader would reach out with his hand in a last gesture and whisper, "Son." Meanwhile, now at the Rebel base, Yoda would have passed from his injuries as well, transcending the physical plane and becoming a Force ghost. Leia, however, would be in contact with both Yoda and now Obi-Wan, and they would tell her it would be time to begin her real training as a Jedi. They would tell her all was not lost, and that the war would continue with her at the forefront. Across the galaxy, an armor-clad Luke would enter into the conference room of one of the Empire's few remaining Super Star Destroyers. With all the high-ranking members of the Empire, Luke would enter slowly, stating that the Empire was his now, and his alone. Luke would tell them the power he wielded was far greater than they could even comprehend, and even though the Death Star was destroyed, the rebellion was in its final days. Instantly, all the occupants of the room would be lifted into the air by their throats with the Force, as Luke would wander to the blast window and stare into space. Behind him, one by one, the high-ranking officers would fall to the floor, lifeless. He would then smile and reach out to Leia through the Force, telling her that even though the Jedi may have returned, a new version of Sith had risen as well. So there you have it, that's how I think it would all play out. I tried to take elements from the films and keep them similar, but change the characters and situations slightly, as I thought that would be really interesting. I really like the idea that Luke was nearly the perfect Jedi, and now in this continuity, he is like the perfect Sith. I also thought it was a cool addition to add the dark side cave on Dagobah and kind of use it as an alternate means than Yoda actually perceived it to be used originally. Now this version of Luke would actually use it to grow more powerful in the dark side rather than have it as kind of a teaching tool. I've also really wanted to see the role reversal between Luke and Leia and see how Leia would handle being a Jedi, and honestly, I think she'd be a great one. Please leave in the comments how you guys think this would play out. Keep in mind, this was only my version of the story, and yours may be very different. Thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.